I was kind of expecting P2 from Lando.
They could have split the strategy. They should have won today.
That's what made this race interesting.
It's very much on brand for him to not get it done.
You say he messed up. He got P3 for sprint quali, P2 in race quali, so I don't know if that's quite taking your eye off the ball.
McLaren have two equal drivers that have taken wins off each other.
That's why it was really a fumble. If Max wins, you can do the podcast solo next week.
Oh, dude. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Welcome to Fresh Rubber.
Welcome back. You have reached a peak time of emotional response to what's happening in front of us. Whether it's the emotional support that Ferrari drivers seem to need at the moment, it's clearly in abundance, or whether it is about the management of team harmony and failure on the McLaren side, or whether it's just watching everyone else trip up around you while you sail serenely through, like Max Verstappen did this weekend. There's a lot to unpack, and I can see you've brought your love hearts. So Gav, I got to ask, are these love hearts to express sort of an inner peace, or are you just sort of hiding and shielding yourself from the pain of the world of the last 2 days?
It's called denial, Jace. That the love heart glasses are denial. Just going to live behind these for half the podcast and then take them off when we breathe a little bit of hope, statistically, back into what happened this weekend. But yeah, pretty. I don't know, man. Like, can we call McLaren Scuderia? They've really kind of got down on Ferrari's level, haven't they? With the tactics and the team orders this weekend. They've certainly not shone. I think they're probably licking their wounds. How do you feel about the race? Given that you're non-partisan, I'm highly partisan. I've given up my pretense of, a podcast where, we don't really let our feelings show. But the sunglasses say it all. I'm hurting. I'm hurting, Jace. We had the opportunity today, if you're a Lando fan, particularly, we had the opportunity to wrap up this championship one race before the end. If Lando had have won today, rather than the team fumbling it and him fumbling it in quali, then I would be sleeping like a baby tonight and just looking forward to Abu Dhabi just for the spectacle. And yet, here we are, Jace. I'm feeling flashbacks of 2021. I'm feeling flashbacks of Max and Lewis. I'm still a big Lewis fan. I was a huge Lewis fan in 2021. Lewis was robbed. Latifi put it in the wall. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch the 2021 end-of-year race, final race of the year. I'm feeling some trauma, and I'm just holding on. I've got 1 week to hold on. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself this week. I'm probably going to put myself, I don't know, have some saunas, have some steam baths, try and not think about the inevitable happening again and Max winning his 5th title. There's still a chance for Lando, isn't there? There's still a chance, Jace.
I love this mental image of Verstappen coming in sort of Thanos-like, saying, "I am inevitable," coming along with all that pomp and fanfare. Look, I don't think we can call them the Scuderia McLaren just yet, although they sure are making their best effort to try and bottle it up. And also, I guess, from Lando's side, it's kind of very much on brand for him to not quite get it done. So I think, like, when you signed yourself up to this emotional journey, Gav, you did know what you had in store for you. But I actually think that Lando's still in the pound seat. I think he's still got the best odds in front of him. I was looking earlier today at some breakdown of all the different permutations of how people could win, and Lando still has the most, and he also has the least work to do, relatively speaking. He still does have a 12-point advantage over Verstappen, so Verstappen's really got to pull one out of the bag, and Norris has got to have a really, really bad weekend and next weekend.
You've nailed it in that. From Max's position, and even more so from Piastri's position, not only do they have to win, but Lando has to really, really crash out. He has to crash out. So, for example, and I'm sure you've been poring over these stats today, like I have, if Lando comes third in this final race in Abu Dhabi, he wins regardless of where anyone else comes.
Job done.
Job done. So Max comes first, Lando comes third. If he comes fourth and Max comes first, Max wins. The odds are even harder for Piastri. I believe that Piastri would have to win the race and Lando would have to come sixth or below. So you're right. You know, having to win it and to have someone else do really poorly, who's shown a lot of form recently, is a tall order for Max and Piastri. Whereas the burden on Piastri is just to get that car across the line in P3 or above, which is very, very doable given the form he's in. However, let's not forget that, you know, that McLaren, I think, is the only engine that's blown up this season. So Lando's already suffered that. So if Lando has a DNF through mechanical failure, then it's over to Max and Piastri. If they put the car too low, like they did last week, and Lando gets disqualified, it's, you know, that's Max's championship sealed. Or if Lando bottles it and puts it in the wall, which is also entirely possible because we do know that Lando, although he's been on fantastic form for the first half of the year, he did put it in the wall, or he did overtake on the grass and put it in the wall. Like he can do things like that, and he's not always been the greatest starter. So look, it's really Lando's to lose at this point. If he does lose it, I really hope it's something that's out of his control. I hope it's not something that he fumbles. But yeah, the odds are in Lando's favour.
Yeah, and I think also adding to that, it's not like he has to win this race in order to win the championship. So I would be going into that next round feeling relatively calm, which he seems to be, thinking, well, we are in a tight championship battle, but McLaren, that car does seem to be performing. I think Vegas was an anomaly due to the low grip circumstances of that track and that race. But the McLaren drivers were in a league of their own today, which is partly why it's so confusing as to how they didn't win. So I think championship maths aside, there's something here for us to dig into and unpack, because on paper, they should have won today. They should have won and won comfortably, and yet they didn't. And when we were going into the Qatar Grand Prix, there was, I think, a decent chance that it could be a dull as dishwater race with a mandated 25 max lap stint length that Pirelli had put in place to contend with the risk of tyre failure. There could
just explain that. Just explain that, because that's a very key thing we should talk about. Explain what you mean by that for those.
So the Qatar Grand Prix is at the Losail International Circuit, which is actually designed for motorcycles, not for open wheel four-wheel cars. And it's got a very high grip level. The circuit inherently has a high grip level. And this can be a problem for the cars as they're going around the circuit at high speed. And with the high grip, the tires can fail. And in 2023, I think it was, we had multiple failures, or maybe it's 21, multiple tire failures during the race, which did impact the finish outcome. So Pirelli doesn't want their brand to be shown on international motorsports event like this with tire failures, and we also don't want it from a sporting perspective. So the best solution that Pirelli could come up with was to limit the number of laps that you could do. So there's a mandated maximum number of laps this year at this circuit of 25. So the teams could only run their tires for 25 laps, and they needed to change. Given that the number of laps for the Qatar Grand Prix was 57 and the maximum stint length was 25, this meant that inevitably we were going to have a 2-stop race at the minimum, possibly 3. So it really depended a lot on how the tires performed in the race, and we can speak a little bit about that, but also this dynamic of there being a mandatory 2-stop race. If you remember in Monaco this season, we had a mandatory 2-stop race, and that was fun. It was like the most boring race, although Monaco's a different beast altogether. The Qatar Grand Prix was, I think on paper coming into it, it could have been a really dull race. Were you worried about that at all before the race kicked off, Gav?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was worried about it being a dull race by virtue of this kind of, you're only allowed to do 25 laps per tyre. Um, and it actually would have been a really boring race because everyone would have had to come in about the same, yeah, basically about the same time, within a lap or two. But then, of course, we had a safety car. We had two cars collide, and we had a safety car come out. And was it virtual or real?
It was real.
It was a real, yeah. So it was a real safety car. Sorry, I watched it very, very in the very early hours of the morning. So it's a real safety car comes out, and what happens for those who weren't following it closely or haven't watched it was that everyone made the right decision except McLaren. So everyone was like, we've got to do 2 stops. There's a safety car. Oh gosh, look how many laps we've done. We now can go in and get a 9-second pit stop rather than a 20-something second pit stop. Let's all go in. Except, of course, McLaren, who didn't. And that's probably what made this race interesting, was that everyone else just kind of did their stop. So their next stop was, I think, at 32 laps or so. And then everyone was done. But McLaren...
It put them out of sync, which was what made the race interesting.
It put 2 cars, the McLarens, out of sync with what everyone really should have done. And so then we have this chase where Piastri's champing at the bit, saying, like, let me go after Max. I want to get in earlier, get some fresh boots on and go chase Max. Lando kind of left out there for a while, losing position, getting put back into the, not into the middle of the pack, but, with 2 cars ahead of him. So going from P3 to P5, P6. That's what made this race interesting. I think otherwise it would have been quite dull.
Yeah, because it was likely that they'd all stop at the same time. Like most of the teams did, that they'd all stop on lap 22, 23 or 24, more or less at the same time. And then again at lap, 50. So there was a good chance that it'd be a pretty processional race. But we can, I guess, be grateful that someone attempted an overtake. And that overtake didn't quite pay off. And that resulted in a safety car. And the great thing about it was that it kind of artificially created the circumstances which we'd normally see if one driver was going for one additional stop. So if the standard race is a 1 stop, that Max would do a 2-stop strategy, and instead of trying to manage his tyres and eke it out, he'd just go hell for leather and try and win on pace alone. So that's kind of the situation that we got. And it did make the race entertaining. In that middle stint, the McLaren drivers were just absolutely on fire. They were going as fast as they could, qualifying lap after lap, which is not easy, just on the best of times. And at the Qatar circuit was just phenomenal to watch them. And yet it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for them to build a big enough gap to be able to stop again ahead of Verstappen. And with Norris, it was lucky in a way that he didn't end up coming out behind more cars when he came out. I was amazed that he came out ahead of, I think it was Alonso at the time, and he managed to be able to hold that P5 and then eventually convert that to P5. Sorry, P5.
Yeah, I mean, Lando was aware of what was going. Lando was fighting for his life because obviously Piastri was ahead, so Piastri gets the first pit stop. You can either double stack them, bring them in together for a pit stop, in which case Lando loses out, or you can let Oscar have the first pit stop because he's the lead car of the team. That's the rules, papaya rules, and kind of general rules. Normally you give the car in your team that's in front the chance to kind of go first and therefore get the benefit of the undercut. But Lando was fighting for his life. The lap he did, his in lap, which means the lap that he did to come in when he's been told to box and change tyres, was incredible. And only because he did such an incredible lap on his in-lap to change tyres did he come out 1 second ahead of basically a whole slew of cars behind him in a DRS train. So, I don't know. Lando, if I'm looking at this, it's easy to be critical of Lando, but the guy, you've talked about the marbling, you've talked about being off the racing line. I think Lando did incredibly well to finish where he did, given the team tactics, given starting on the side of the grid that he started on. I mean, I don't know if I can remember a track that it's so brutal to start on off the racing line as this. This felt horrific, didn't it?
I
I
think
mean,
Singapore this year had similar characteristics as well, where
yeah,
the
it probably
left-hand
did.
side of the grid all got overtaken at some point on lap one in Singapore. Yeah, I
It makes
think.
you, doesn't it make you just like want to qualify one place less? Like almost like it
But
almost
how?
makes you just,
How do you do that?
you
The
can't,
margins are
you
so
can't,
fine in
you
qualifying.
can't,
If
you
you
can't.
if you lift off even the smallest amount, then you'll be in P10 on quali. No, it was amazing, and I think with Norris, he had a rough qualifying for both the sprint and for the race, and so he essentially he messed up both of them, Q3 for both sprint quali and qualifying, and so you just think, is he has he taken his eye off the ball a little bit? Is he a little bit
I mean,
complacent with what's
I
going
mean,
on?
I mean, you say he messed up. He got P3 for sprint quali, which obviously the car's capable of more, but it's not awful. And he got P2 in the race quali. So I don't know if that's quite taking your eye off the ball. I think
Think
that
about
yes,
think about the impact of that. Starting on the dirty side, that's the
I,
mess
do, I
up.
I am thinking of the impact of it, but I don't think that correlates to a failed quali on either of those. P3 and P2 are very respectable qualies, and it's not his. It's actually, this is interesting about this track. I wonder what he was thinking coming into it, because actually Piastri's beaten him here the last 2 years. This is Piastri's favorite track of the year. There was a feeling that that Piastri probably was going to dominate Lando. Like these drivers, this is 24 races this year. They all have their favorite tracks. They all have the tracks that they hate, and they have the tracks that they're kind of like, well, it's a bit vanilla. They're either, but like this is a track where Piastri is historically dominant, right? So I was kind of expecting P2 or P. Well, I was kind of expecting P2 from Lando. But yeah, then you throw Max in, and then a P2 becomes a P3 for Lando. So I don't know. I don't think he had an awful weekend. I think Lewis Hamilton. Oh my gosh, I'm just holding my hands in my face with poor Lewis at the moment. Like
What they did to
something.
my boy. That's how it feels with Lewis at the moment.
What if I was speaking to my partner the other day about it, and he said that she said it's a she. Could be he, but it's a she. She said it's really interesting that when Lewis got the offer to go to Ferrari, he approached a number of the Mercedes team members, Bono in particular, and said, his race engineer of many years and many victories, and said, would you come with me to Ferrari? And Bono said no. And just a bit of like that feeling of, I think one of the pundits or ex drivers was saying the other day, when you make a move like this from somewhere like Mercedes to Ferrari, a big career move, you really want to not be doing it alone. You want to bring your team with you. And I thought that was a really fascinating, and basically Lewis didn't bring any of his team with him. He went completely alone into a completely new team. So Lewis didn't have that camaraderie, that emotional support. That's it. We all love to be known, right? In our friendships and relationships, we love that feeling of being known. He's going to somewhere where he's not known, where it's very isolating. And so in that context, it makes you realize that some of Lewis's performance this year might just be down to isolation, might just be down to speaking in one language and not being heard in another, not having anyone to not having Bonner, his race engineer, be like, come on, Max, it's like, it's hammer, come on, Lewis, it's hammer time. Like he doesn't even, I remember at the beginning of the season, they were like, what, if you don't follow Lewis, every time that his race engineer was like, right, you need to chase this win down, he would say, it's hammer time. I remember in the first few races, they asked Lewis like, oh, what's the new hammer time in Ferrari? Like, what's your race engineer going to say to you when it's time to come back from P15 and win the race? And he's like, oh, we haven't really worked it out. I'm sure we'll think of something. That was a bad omen. That means that your engineer hasn't worked out that this has been a part of your story, that like there's this go word that you use, like just like Max says, it's simply lovely, simply lovely. You know, everyone has these kind of words, and what they are is their inner jokes, their inside jokes, like Carlos Sainz. What is Carlos? A smooth operator. Like, they've all got these things, and it sounds silly on the surface, but some of these things are like their culture, their story, their history. Anyway, I've talked a lot about that, but all to say, this
it's
this
the
is
relationship. I think that's what you're getting at, is the team. And we focus a lot on the drivers and what they do on track and the heroics they manage. But ultimately, it is a major team game, and you rely a lot on those around you. And if they're not all pulling their weight, if they're not feeding you the information that you need, if you're not understanding each other, either through cultural difference, language difference, or ways of working differences, you're going to end up with mistakes, fumbles, like what happened in Las Vegas last round when Lewis was told to push and then he didn't listen, or he didn't understand, and then he said, are we safe? And it turned out that they weren't safe, and he qualified 20th for the first time in his career. He's been in the sport since 2007, and he's a 7-time world champion. I think he knows what he's doing when it comes to putting a lap together. So clearly that collaboration relationship is not working. And I think for Lewis, this round was just so devastating because he's been on a bit of a downward slope throughout the season. But this time around in his interviews, it was like a broken man who'd been dragged before the world's media to reveal, you know, how bad it is. At one point, one of the interviewers asked him, I'm doing it too, asked him, you've got all these fans around the world, you know, who support you and who wish you well. What's your message for them? And it was like he'd been kicked in the guts and then asked, what, you know, can you put a pretty picture on it? And he just said, I don't have a message for them. Thank you for your support. I don't think I could have made it through this year without you. It illustrates just how low this goat has sunk, and it's really, really hard to watch. It's incredibly hard to watch as a Lewis fan. The only glimmer of hope, really, is that there's only one more round of beating for him before he gets to contend with what Ferrari have cooked up for next year. And if it isn't good, and if it isn't up to his standard, that's what he should remember. If it's not up to his standard, then it's actually probably the right time for him to move on and go and enjoy being a cultural icon, a fashion icon, a beloved figure. Go and be the best person that he can be, and not be dragged down by this shambles of a team, which is the Scuderia Ferrari.
I mean, I think if he has a terrible season, he won't be given a choice to stay next year anyway. I think you probably think the same. So unless the sponsorship money is such high value that they give him maybe one more year to have another go. But I don't think if he performs badly, he'll get another chance to do it anyway. So I completely agree with you. It's really not fun watching someone do 3 or 4 or 5 seasons of slow downfall. Much like everyone at this point, his story isn't Lewis was great and then he had like 7 years of just being worse and worse and worse. Like, you don't want to touch that story. You don't want that to be your legacy. You like, if he stops at the end of next year, that's not going to be an issue. But if he keeps going for 3 or 4 more years in lower tier teams, I just think like Alonso's kind of cut out for that because he's just such a flipping chiller. He's not emotional. Again, I was talking to my partner about this.
What are you talking about?
Alonso used to be, but not anymore.
He gets so mad.
Yeah, he's no.
He just rage quits a race.
Yeah, but he doesn't sulk on camera, and he isn't like a wounded puppy dog if he's not doing well. He's like, and he just gets back in there and he flipping sends at the next race, and he is made of a different material than Lewis. Lewis is a sensitive, very sensitive, and I would say a little bit insecure personality. Fernando's just a fiery Spanian. Like,
Fernando can never do any wrong.
Well, he's just like he's just having like, honestly, he's not Lando. He's not racing for a top tier team. Although next year he might
Next year,
be with,
maybe.
with their new team. I was going to say their new designer / team principal, but he's just having fun. Like, he's not. I don't think he's expecting much. Whereas Lewis is still expecting the world at his feet, and that is the difference between Alonso and Hamilton. And in this situation, Alonso can go home to his partner, have a glass of wine, put his feet up and say, yeah, that was a fun race and the other one was terrible. Lewis isn't there yet. And I don't think Lewis is really ever going to be that guy. He's fought through too much, Lewis. Like, only black driver on the grid, comes from a lower middle class home in the UK. Dad worked 3 jobs to get him through karting. Those stories don't exist anymore. Like, to get into F1 now, the money's so huge, you probably will never get a story like Lewis Hamilton again. Like, he's fought through too much just to be nonchalant about it. He's not Perez, he's not Yuki, he's not Leclerc, like these kind of super rich kids. He's like a London kid. Do you know what I mean?
He's like
he's
a man of the people.
He's a massive man of the people, but that is when you fought your way up like that from that background. It's just different. It's different. I don't know. It feels different to me with him. It's his whole.
I think the other part
I don't
of it
know.
is, I think the other part, having not watched F1 in 2007, I can only imagine. But watching a young pup like that come out of the blocks so explosively, and to be challenging for a world championship in your rookie season and to lose it by 1 point is just astonishing. So he's cut from different cloth. He's made of different stuff. Sometimes that can be to his detriment, and sometimes that can really set him apart. I think someone else who's really standing themselves apart would be Carlos Sainz, and the results he keeps dragging out of that Williams. The Williams,
Carlos.
They have fully locked P5 in the Constructors' Championship. They cannot
locked.
They cannot be touched, and a lot of that, you have to say, is down to the sterling performances that Carlos is dragging out of that machinery. Albon is being shown the ropes. It's like, you've had your time here, mate. We're real good friends, but when the wheels stay on the car and when things go right, I'm going to put it on the podium. And that's just something that Albon can't do. He hasn't done it. He can't do it. And so Carlos Sainz is really showing us what it means to be a successful Williams driver in the modern era. And I'm all for it. And you've got to think Carlos has got to be sort of grateful for Lewis taking his seat at Ferrari, because in other circumstances that could have been Carlos with his stock plummeting, watching those performances happen unfolding in front of him. But instead, he's on the ascendancy. He's with James Vowles. He's soaring off into the distance. He's being a smooth operator. He's winning hearts and minds. He can't even get a word in edgeways when he's on the post-race interviews because the crowd just throws so much love at him. Carlos is the man of the hour.
100%. He's such a dude. He's like, I've always loved him. I think it really hurt him getting the flick from Ferrari for Lewis and all the funding that comes with Lewis and the branding that comes with Lewis. But he dealt with it like a gentleman. He never had a bad word to say. He's such a legend. And really, this, like you say, I feel like what you're getting at is like, yes, Carlos had a rough first half of the year in Williams, but he's found his feet. He's like, I'm a top draw, world-class racing driver. I'm going to make this Williams work for me. And that is what you want to see. And so I'm really excited. I'm just so excited for Williams, P5 and the Constructors. So excited for them. James Vowles should be so proud of himself. He's got a 5 to 7 year plan. What I love about James Vowles is he's just like, he's basically saying like, our goal is not to pretend that we're going to win next year or even the year after. Our goal is to win in about 3 or 4 years' time. And whether that's realistic or not, I don't know. But like, James is dragging that team up, notch by notch, like slowly. It's like the tortoise and the hare. It's like He's just slowly, and he's got vision that's going. He's probably got a vision. He's got vision for a decade. I would have thought.
Experience. He's seen what it's like to be at a top team and to run at the highest level, and you never know. Next year could be one of those years where the team that you least expect it is at the front round after round. So it really could be their year next year. You never know. And also for Sainz to hold off Norris. That was no mean feat for him to be able to hold on to those tyres at the end of the race. All the tyres, they're all really old by that stage. At that point, Norris's tyres were something like 12 laps younger. So Norris had a tyre advantage and a faster car fundamentally, chasing him down, and really struggled to get past Antonelli, which is also, shout out to Antonelli. He's almost beating Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship, 2 points behind. So let's go Antonelli next round. But for Sainz to be able to hold off a fast-charging Norris, who he is determined to win this championship and is going to try everything to get past his former teammate, that's box office. So
I mean,
Sainz,
to be fair, he had about 2 laps to do it after being in the hot air of Antonelli for 14 laps or something.
But Sainz also had damage. He was losing speed because of the floor damage that he had. So it's even more impressive that on a track like that.
It was good. I mean, it was good. It was a good performance. It wouldn't have lasted 3 or 4 more laps, to be fair. But it was. Doesn't matter. Who cares if it would have lasted 3 or 4 more laps? Same with Antonelli the other day, holding off the other two. Who was he holding off?
Piastri.
Do you remember who he's? Yeah, Piastri and Leclerc, right?
Come on.
Yeah, Piastri and Leclerc. Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah, but that was incredible Antonelli, because that was over the course of 15, 17 laps or something ridiculous on really old tyres.
Yeah, 48 lap tyres.
No credit, 48 lap tyres and over a period of 15, 16 laps. So that was really impressive. Carlos probably got a bit lucky today, but that's how it goes. That's racing. I think the more I watch F1, the more I realise that sometimes you make your own luck, and sometimes you kill your luck by not pitting under a safety car. What do you think, just before we move on to anything else, and I know you won't be able to answer this question because you won't be in the minds of McLaren, but your best guess, why did McLaren not pit under that safety car?
This is an amazing question. Amazing question. Do you remember, I think it was Hungary 21, when there was a situation at the start of the race where they all went out on wet tyres, intermediate tyres, and at the end of the formation lap, everyone but Lewis Hamilton, who was in the lead, pitted for slick tyres. Do you remember this? It was...
I don't actually.
Unfathomable. Imagine the starting grid of a race and there's one car on the grid. And that's Lewis Hamilton. Go check out the highlights of this. It's insane. So it was a wet dry race, and they started on intermediate tyres. They all do their formation lap, and they all decide to come into the pit lane except for Lewis. And the reason why Lewis couldn't was because he was in the lead of the race. So if you pit, you give up the track position. You give up the advantage that you've got. And you don't know if the drivers behind you are going to pit or not. So totally. It's a huge gamble to pit or not to pit. And in the end, in that race, he went from first to last. It was terrible. That's the race that Esteban Ocon won, if I'm not mistaken. So I think when you're in position, it's such a psychological mind game to pit or not to pit, because you are giving up track position. And like with Hungary, at Qatar, overtaking is really hard. You need a huge overspeed, and they didn't have that, even though they had a dominant car. I think they erred on the side of caution of not giving up that track position. Also, I think they didn't know whether the tyres would last. On lap 7 or lap 8, that essentially meant 2 25-lap stints, which was the maximum allowed length, and none of them had run tyres for that long throughout the whole weekend. So they didn't know that the tyres would do the distance. So chances are they pit and they end up in a situation where they need to do a 3-stop race and they lose time anyway. And Verstappen chooses not to pit because the McLaren boys pitted. So he stays out, does the contra strategy, and then he's off in the distance and they lose anyway. So that's my kind of mental maths about what's going on in their minds at the time.
I agree with you. I think the reason it's so hard to pit first under a safety car is because if you're leading the race, you give up track position. You could go in to pit, and everyone else could just be like, "Fantastic, thank you so much." And then you literally come out at the back of, towards the back, at the back of the,
it would have been in traffic.
The grids. At traffic very far back, yeah, because like remember everyone was still pretty close at this point in the race, so it would have been horrific. So I think the one thing they just didn't think about that was unique to this race was that everyone had to pit twice. That's why it was really a fumble. They didn't do the quick math of like, actually I think everyone behind us will take, knowing they have to do a minimum of 2 stops, will take this cheap stop because they've got to do it anyway. They just didn't do the math, I think. And I don't know.
The other thing about it that they could have done, and they chose not to, and this is where it comes down to the philosophy of racing, is they could have split the strategy. They could have left one out and put one on fresh rubber.
They really could have done.
They want to have this, and I think it's a fascinating question, because we talked about this on chat about whether or not Verstappen would have won the championship by now in the McLaren machinery. And we sort of went back and forth about the fact that McLaren have 2 equal drivers that have taken wins off each other. They've kind of split the points between them, whereas if you combine them, then they would have won easily. With Verstappen and Red Bull, they've kind of never had to make that tough decision of having one driver to prioritize over another. Whether that's, I think that's by design, that's by virtue of the quality of the driver, and that's also, some chance involved in that. But they've always had a one driver who's in the lead. That's Verstappen, that's Red Bull, that's a package. Whereas McLaren's got this too. And this year they've tried their darndest to make it fair and equal between them. And it might end up causing them a major fail by the end of the season. They might lose the Drivers' Championship. They might also lose P2 in the Drivers' Championship. Verstappen's got it now, but he might not have it next week. And it's like a philosophy difference between McLaren and Red Bull that's just, the light's been shone on it in a really big way this year. You ask about the headspace of them in that moment, but I think it's about wouldn't you say it's about the headspace throughout the whole season? This is this like story kind of unfolding in front of us.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what McLaren will do if Max wins the Drivers' Championship next week, for the reasons that you've just expressed. This idea of not having a number 1 driver whose job it is to go attempt to win the title, and a number 2 driver whose job it is to kind of support that. To know that they've lost the Drivers' Championship by trying to be perfectly fair all the way through the year, under much criticism, by the way, because I think there is generally a feeling that everyone at McLaren kind of feels like it's kind of, Lando's been around a bit longer, he's been very faithful. I wish they had have just said, like, this is Lando's year. Like, he's stuck with this team through thick and thin. He's racing really well. Like, he's our number 1 driver. Piastri, you're a very young driver in the sport. You're here to support him. You'll have your moment. But they didn't. And
I think if the season trajectories were different, they might have been able to. But for a good chunk of the season, Piastri was ahead. How do you say that Piastri give Norris the lead? You just can't do that.
No, you can't. You can't do that. And I think maybe you've hit the nail on the head with that one as well. You're actually talking about 2 very evenly matched drivers, whereas anyone that Max is next to a car in just fades in comparison. So maybe being a brilliant racing driver means that everyone has to just get behind you. Whereas, Lando and Piastri, both, as shown this year, can both win on any given day and are not too dissimilar as drivers. My big question, though, is, and I was pondering this today, what are they going to do next week? because, like we said, all Lando needs is to finish third, and he's won. Piastri needs to win it, and for Lando to finish sixth. Now, I don't like those odds for Piastri.
Yeah.
And just say, for example, put yourself in this situation. Piastri is P3. Lando's behind him in P4. If they cross the line in that order, Piastri doesn't win and Lando doesn't win. And Max does win. Surely. At that point.
Surely they've got
Surely,
to.
right?
Yep.
They've got to have that conversation,
100%,
right?
100%. So I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2023.
But what if Piastri... No, wait. What if Piastri's like, no,
I
want to get on the podium.
He won't.
Know, but what if he is?
I love the drama. I think he'll and ah and defer it until the last possible moment, because that's what you got to do if you're a competitive spirit. But I think it's just like, it's unfathomable to think that Piastri would screw over his teammate and his team in such a way, given everything that they've both spoken about throughout the season, about not only wanting harmony this year, but harmony into the years ahead in the future. Why would Piastri do that? I don't understand that. Even in the heat of the moment with the red mist descending and
Max
all of the adrenaline.
Max would definitely do it, wouldn't he? Max would
for sure. He would have done it
Max
10,
would be like,
10 rounds ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, speaking of the long-term victory, though, I looked into this recently. The last time McLaren had a 1-2 finish in the Drivers' Championship was a long, long, long time ago. Would you like me to tell you when it was?
Yes.
1989.
That's 1989.
That what? Really?
Yeah.
Great. 1989 was when they had Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost driving for them. That was the last year that they raced together for McLaren, and they won 1-2. It was their second 1-2 in a row, and famously, those two drivers fell out because they couldn't agree and they couldn't get along and they couldn't work together as teammates. So I don't know, like, different people work at McLaren these days, but I think the story of Prost and Senna at McLaren looms large over pretty much everything that McLaren does in the modern F1 era. And they're really allergic to anything that might create that kind of atmosphere again. So I really think that if it comes down to it, next week, Norris needs a favor from Piastri. Piastri will do it. And if he doesn't, then I'm tearing up any shred of integrity I had for Piastri. I will tear down all the posters I don't have of Piastri from the wall. I will throw out my Piastri fan club. I'll go and spit in every burger that he sells from that burger joint. I'll be very unhappy because
what about your Piastri undies?
Nobody touches those.
Will you burn them?
Okay. I just think, there's a competitive fighting spirit that you want. You want some cutthroat, but you also, I think, you got to get behind your teammates sometimes and do the right thing for them and for the team. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually he's a good kid. So Abu Dhabi next. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about 2021 and.
Have we? I don't remember it coming up.
Yeah, we talked about it early in the season about my personal trauma.
Okay.
With Lewis getting robbed by Michael Massey, and anyway, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you haven't watched the 2021 finale, do yourself a favor, go and watch it. It's one of the most notorious races in recent F1 history. But another race, which I was digging around today and found out about, was the 2010 race here at Abu Dhabi, which was not dissimilar to what we're seeing. Obviously, we're seeing three drivers fight it out here, Max, Lando, and Piastri. But in 2010, there was also an end-of-year finale, which had the Red Bull teammates Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, and Fernando Alonso at Ferrari, and Lewis at McLaren, believe it or not. And this was there was a bit of trouble. I think Hamilton and Alonso got tangled. I think, and Sebastian went on to win his world title. But this is like, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, we have been here before in 2010, where there's like a number of drivers who could secure it. But four, can you imagine four? Can you imagine imagine having like Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton in one final race, one ring, one steering wheel to rule them all. Like, that would have been incredible.
Yeah, it's hard enough working out the championship math permutations with three.
With three, but with four.
Let alone four. Yeah, and you think, next week, I am going to be watching with the pause button. And I'm going to be pausing every lap and just checking my championship maths ladder again and go, all right, cool, we're still good. Play again, see what happens in the next lap. Man, it's nuts. I mean, that track, it's not my favorite track. But in terms of delivering spectacle and delivering on that end of season finale vibe, it has good history, and it has been the home of some pretty spectacular and devastating championship wins, a la 2021, and 2010 was Sebastian Vettel's first world championship win. And I think, if I recall correctly, he came into that last round behind on points. So let's hope that's not a good portent for Max Verstappen coming into the final round behind on points. But 12 points is a big gap to claw back. Verstappen's clawed back bigger gaps over the course of the last rounds. He got 30 points this round. 30 points in one round. So he's got form. And by the way, his car was a dog this weekend as well. Like, he was not happy. He was complaining about all the jumping, balance shifting back and forth. It's just insane what that guy can pull out of a race car. But it's a big gap for them to claw back, and Norris is in the pound seat. He's got the advantage. I think it's game on, and I think we're going to end up with a happy Gavin at the end of it. For your sake, I hope that's the case. And if it's not, I don't know. I think McLaren will lick their wounds, pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get right back into it in 2026. I'm very optimistic about that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is the great unknown as we come to the end of this year. And by the way, we'll be podcasting. We'll still be kind of maybe not quite as regularly, but we will be jumping on here to talk about things that we're hearing and learning about the car development, some of the testing. So do stay in touch and do keep subscribed. But I think it's such an unknown, isn't it? Like, we're going to assume Mercedes have got a pretty good car lined up for next year. Probably Aston with their new engineer. So I think Adrian Newey. So I think, yeah, but like, who knows? Like, was this the only chance McLaren had to win, to have a Drivers' World Champion for another 15 years? Could be. This could be it. This could be it. We could be looking at Williams. We could be looking.
Okay.
We could be looking at Williams, in 3 years' time, and McLaren's right back down the bottom end of the order. You never know.
I really hope not. They've fought tooth and nail to try and get back out of those late teen doldrums where they were just languishing at the back of the field. I really hope this is not the end of the story for McLaren. But
me too.
I guess if it comes at the price of a new entrant stepping in, another story team like Williams taking that on, that I would have no problem with that whatsoever. And Aston Martin, when you think about the history and lineage of that team, Racing Point before that, Force India before that, Jordan a few iterations before that. For that team to be able to pull it together, that would be pretty spectacular, I'd say. So I would be happy about that. Rest in peace, Eddie Jordan. But I think the jumbling up of the field in the first half of next season is going to be fascinating. There's talk about there being seconds between the cars in terms of lap time, whereas at the moment we're talking tenths of a second or even hundreds of a second splitting the cars in qualifying, first through to 20th. So the kind of field spread that we're going to see is exciting. And
we've got Cadillac
coming in. We could actually finally see a different team winning the championship instead of Red Bull and Mercedes. Although Constructors' Championship, no one really cares. But, that's off with McLaren. It's exciting times. It's really exciting times. And the other thing I'll say about this season before we sort of shift off is, isn't it fascinating how well the Ferrari customer teams appear to be doing in contrast to the works team?
Yeah, it's nuts.
Last time I mentioned Hülkenberg and Hamilton scrapping it out quite a few times this year. It's amazing to see a driver like Behrman, for instance, Hülkenberg, Bortoleto having some good performances, outperforming the Ferrari works team. It's got to be so embarrassing, which is partly what leads to John Elkann coming out and saying, "Do you talking on track, boys?" And neither of them listening to that instruction and coming out and completely saying, "This car sucks. There's no performance." It blows me away.
And I think you could also level that at Mercedes. Like, as of today, McLaren have 800 points, and Mercedes have half that, bit over half that, 459. Like, that McLaren's got a Mercedes engine in it. Like, also just a bit embarrassing for Mercedes for your engine to be double out points scored at this point. It is
and the only
it is
engine
nuts.
that popped this season. The only one.
The only engine that
multiple
popped
teams
this season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you know what I found a fascinating stat? And I don't know why I ever. And maybe it's this way every year. Could you guess off the top of your head how many people have won? How many of the 20 drivers have won a GP this year?
How many of them?
How many?
I want to say
first place.
I want to say 8.
4, dude. I couldn't believe it. 4.
4.
4. Lando, Piastri, Max, and George are the only 4 of the 20 who have won a GP this year.
I guess that makes sense considering the drivers' championship standings. That does make sense.
Yeah, it does. But I was just like, is that normal? I'm going to have to go and dig around. Like, is there... It just feels like, oh, so no one else got to stand on the top step. Oh, okay. Of course George did. Only twice.
Yeah.
I think so. So we've got 7. This is another really interesting thing about this finale. Not that I think it will come down to this, but Max has won 7, Lando's won 7, and Piastri's won 7. So it's the 777 club. They've all won 7. I think that's probably very unusual to go into the last race with the top 3 drivers, who are all, by the way, fighting for this championship, all having won 7 races. And then George has smugly won 2. But I thought that was interesting.
I guess you're not counting sprint races as well, because Hamilton won one of the sprint races.
Yes,
but
I'm not counting sprint races.
I don't really like sprint races. I've said this
flipping
before.
Love them.
I find it problematic. It's like a spoiler for the main race, but there's also like too much going on at the same time in the weekend.
Listen, Jason,
I'm not a fan.
Jason, I'm a basic human being in this sense. I get to watch 2 qualies and I get to watch 2 races, and I'm so happy. Do I think it's good for the teams? No. Max has come out and said he hates sprint weekends. Like, kind of tactical, switched on, intelligent drivers and teams need practice 1, 2, and 3 to dial the car in, and that's why Max hates it. He likes it. He cares about that. I think actually, if you went around the grid, almost every driver would say they hate sprints. So I think you're on the driver's side. I'm on the entertainment side for the chaos and for getting to watch 2 qualies and 2 races. But yeah, you've probably got the moral high ground, and they'd probably take you out for dinner and not me for saying that. So yeah,
Don't tell them that you said that when they do take me out for dinner.
You better tell them that they said that, and you better get a signed Lando cap for me when you're chatting to Lando. Okay.
Done.
What do we got left? We've got Abu Dhabi left. That's what we've got. Fascinating track. The good thing about it is there's overtaking does happen here. I don't know what it was last year, but in 2023 there were 113 overtakes, and that is spicy. So there's going to be overtaking where there wasn't much overtaking today. What are you looking forward to close us out about Abu Dhabi, mate?
One of the things I love about Abu Dhabi, and I don't know if the timing of it will work out this year. I haven't checked that, but one of the things I love about it is that it's always an evening to night race.
Yes, it
starts at dusk and it ends under the lights. It's so spectacular. I love that. I love the sort of that weird shaped hotel that straddles the track where
Yeah.
Latifi put it in the wall all those years ago. I love the colors of it as well. I also think it does have good spots for overtaking. There are a few spots on the track that do lend themselves to overtaking.
Yeah.
So there's
the
challenge
turn
and
six.
there's opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's turn 6 and turn 9 is where we're going to see the majority of the overtaking, which is naturally out of the DRS zones. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of overtaking. I think the teams are going to have to be really switched on because the two of the practices happen in the day when the track's hot, and only one of the practice sessions happens when the track is at a representative temperature early evening, like you say, for the race. So like really challenging for the teams to dial their cars in when they're practicing on a track that's not going to be anything like the track that they race on. So yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting. I'm excited for it. I'm nervous for it. I'm going to stay up till midnight to press play. I'm going to be in bed by 3 a.m. Either crying or just like waking up my wife and just saying, Lando won.
Yeah, well, if Lando wins, why go to bed? Why not just stay up and celebrate?
Do you know what? If Lando doesn't win, if Max wins, you can do the podcast solo next week.
Oh, dude.
You can't expect me to go to the
That'll be
funeral
hard.
that quickly. You can't expect me to do that. No, I'm joking. I'll be there with 3 pairs of sunglasses on. Jace, it's been a pleasure. See you next week for the season finale. Fresh rubber for the win.
Oh, mate. Can't wait. Bring it on. See you then.
See you then.